Once upon a time, in a bright and busy village, lived a couple named Fatima and Aden. They had a little home, not big and fancy, but full of love. Fatima was very pretty, with a kind smile that lit up the room, and Aden was strong and handsome. They were very happy because they had 4 beautiful daughters, each one like a sparkly gem, bright and beautiful. But Fatima and Aden were very poor. Every day Aden worked very hard. He went to other people's farms and did a lot of work just to make sure they had enough food to eat. It wasn't always a lot, but they were thankful for whatever they had. Fatima helped a lot too. She fetched water, washed clothes for other people, and carried loads in the market, all to add a little more for their family. But even with all their hard work, things were tough. The little girls were growing and needed things like books and pencils for school, but Fatima and Aden often found it hard to pay for these. Sometimes the girls would come home early from school because they couldn't pay the fees. It made Fatima and Aden sad, but they hugged their daughters, played with them, and tried to make each day as happy as they could. Their home was always filled with laughter and the sound of little feet running around. Even though they didn't have much, Fatima and Aden loved each other and their daughters so much. They believed that somehow things would get better. They just didn't know how yet. So every night under the twinkly stars, Fatima and Aden would sit outside their small house, hold hands and dream of a better tomorrow for their sweet girls. They knew it wasn't easy, but they had hope, and that was something very special to have. One sunny morning, Aden felt very heavy in his heart. He knew he needed to find a way to make things better for his family. So he decided to visit his friend in the next village, hoping for some help. He walked a long way under the big blue sky, thinking about his little girls and Fatima. When Aden reached his friend's house, he was welcomed with a warm smile. Aden told his friend about the tough times they were having. He asked, "Can you help me with some money?" His friend listened carefully and then said, "Aden, I won't just give you fish. I'll show you how to catch them, so you won't be hungry again." Aden didn't understand at first, but he nodded, hoping for some good news. His friend took him to see an old man called the herbalist, who lived deep in the forest. The herbalist's house was odd, covered in strange marks, and surrounded by weird plants. Aden felt a shiver as he stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of herbs and something else Aden couldn't quite name. The herbalist listened to Aden's story, his eyes twinkling strangely. Then he said, "I can help you become very rich, but it comes with a price." Aden was eager to know more. "What do I need to do?" he asked. The herbalist looked at him seriously and said, "You must use your children in the ritual. They won't die, but they will suffer." Aden was shocked. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "I can't do that," he said. "I want the money to make my children's lives better, not to harm them. I'd rather leave than do this to my daughters." But then the herbalist said something scary. "Now that your eyes have seen and your ears have heard, if you walk away, you won't make it home." Scared and desperate, Aden felt trapped. He thought about their little house, the unpaid school fees, and the empty pots at dinner time. With a heavy heart, Aden agreed to the dark deal, hoping somehow it wouldn't be as bad as it sounded. The herbalist gave him a black powder and instructed him to mix it into his children's food. He left the herbalist's house with a small black pouch and a promise that things would change. But as he walked home, the weight of what he had agreed to felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. After Aden came back from the herbalist's dark and spooky house, he was quiet and sad. He did what the herbalist told him to do, putting a little bit of the black stuff into his daughter's food. He hoped with all his heart that it wouldn't hurt them, that somehow everything would be okay. But the next day something strange and sad happened. A strong wind blew through the village like it was angry about something. It wasn't just any wind. It whistled and howled, rattling doors and shaking trees. Everyone in the village talked about this strange wind, but for Aidan's family, it brought something worse. His eldest daughter, the one with the brightest smile, lost her sight. She couldn't see anything anymore. She cried, saying everything was dark. Aidan's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. He wanted to believe it was just the wind, that it was a strange accident, but inside he knew it was because of the black stuff. The village whispered about the wind and the sudden blindness of Aidan's daughter. Then, on a day that seemed just a little too quiet, a mysterious man came to the village. He wore all black from his hat to his boots, and he carried a big, heavy sack. He walked straight to Aidan's house, silent and swift. He told Aidan and Fatima that he had heard of their daughter's misfortune and had come to help. "Do not open this sack until I leave," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Aidan and Fatima were puzzled but hopeful. They watched the man walk away, and then they opened the sack. Inside, it was filled with money, shiny and gold. For a moment they forgot their worries and danced around, laughing and holding each other. They thought this was the end of their troubles, that maybe the herbalist's deal wasn't so bad after all. But as the coins glittered in the sun, Fatima looked at her daughter, still unable to see, and felt a chill. The stranger had left them wealth, but the strong wind had taken something far more precious. Aidan tried to calm her fears, saying it was just a twist of fate, but he alone knew that this was just the beginning. He had made them pay a price for the coins, a price that was too high, and his wife, Fatima, knew nothing about it. With the sack of money, Aidan and Fatima's lives changed completely. They bought big farms and the largest store in the market. Their home was no longer small and shabby. It became a big, beautiful house, with many rooms. Aidan and Fatima were now rich, and everyone in the village admired them. Their daughters too enjoyed the new luxurious life. They wore the prettiest clothes and had the most beautiful things. They ate the best food and never went hungry. People in the village started calling them princesses because of their new wealth and fancy lifestyle. But even with all the money and new things, there was still sadness in their home. Aidan's eldest daughter was still blind. Fatima often begged Aidan to use some of the money to take her to a healer, but Aidan always said, "No, that's her destiny. We can't change it." Fatima felt sad for her daughter, but she didn't know what to do. She trusted Aidan and believed that he knew best. The villagers sometimes whispered about the blind girl and wondered why Aidan didn't try to help her, but no one dared to ask him directly. So while the family enjoyed their new wealth, there was always a shadow of sadness in their hearts. Aidan and Fatima tried to focus on the good things, but deep down, they knew that their happiness had come at a great cost. 2 years passed and Aidan and Fatima continued to live a life of luxury. Their farms were prosperous and their store was the biggest in the market. Their daughters enjoyed the finest things, but the shadow of the first sacrifice still lingered. Then, one day, the herbalist sent for Aidan. He knew what this meant. He went to see the herbalist, who told him it was time to renew his wealth. This time the sacrifice had to be his second daughter. Aidan felt his heart sink. He didn't want to harm another child, but the herbalist warned him again. If you don't make the sacrifice, you will lose all your wealth and go mad. Aidan felt trapped. After much fear and reluctance, he agreed. He returned home with a heavy heart and mixed another black powder into his children's food. The next morning, his second daughter couldn't speak or hear. She became deaf and dumb. The family was heartbroken and Fatima cried for her child, but Aidan told her it was destiny, just as he had before. A few days later, the same mysterious man in black appeared at their door. This time he said he was travelling and asked to stay the night. By morning he was gone, but he left behind another big sack of money. Ardan and Fatima opened it and found it filled with money again. They were rich once more. Fatima begged Aden to use some of the money to help their second daughter, but Aden refused. He insisted it was her fate and there was nothing they could do. Fatima started to feel suspicious, but she stayed silent, not knowing what to believe. The family continued to live in luxury, but now with 2 daughters who were suffering. Adan and Fatima tried to enjoy their wealth, but the price they had paid weighed heavily on their hearts. Adan's family kept getting richer, but their happiness kept getting smaller. Fatima was very sad and worried about their daughters. She felt something wasn't right. She couldn't understand why bad things happened whenever they got more money. One night, Fatima woke up Aden and asked him about the black powder he always used. She remembered him putting it in their food. Aden tried to avoid her questions, but Fatima kept asking. She felt that something was wrong and needed to know the truth. She noticed he had started behaving strangely, talking to himself and forgetting things. She asked him about the powder again and again. Eventually, Aden, unable to handle the burden alone, broke down and told her everything. He confessed about the deal with the herbalist and how he had sacrificed their daughter's well-being for their wealth. Fatima was horrified and heartbroken. She couldn't believe what Aden had done. Fatima decided they needed to undo the harm. She took their daughters and left Aden, seeking a way to break the curse. She found a wise woman who told her the only way to break the curse was for Aden to confess his sins and beg for forgiveness. Meanwhile, Aden, now truly losing his mind, wandered the streets shouting and screaming. The villagers pitied him but didn't know how to help. Fatima, determined to save her daughters, found Aden and brought him to the wise woman. With a heavy heart, Aden confessed his sins and begged for forgiveness. The wise woman performed a ritual to break the curse. Slowly things began to change. Aden regained his sanity and their daughters began to heal. The family was no longer rich, but they were together and safe. They returned to their small home, grateful for a second chance. The villagers, who had once envied their wealth, now admired their courage. Fatima and Aden worked hard, but this time they were content with what they had. Their daughters grew up healthy and strong, and the family learned the true value of love and togetherness. They realized that wealth wasn't worth the price they had paid, and were thankful for the simple, happy life they had regained.